Trent Horn is a Catholic apologist, sophist extraordinaire, and very confused cis man. Like many apologists, he seems to feel that despite his own identity being rooted in actual mythology, he is somehow in a position to debate the entire consensus of all modern medicine and human-focused science with nothing but a pile of feels and fallacies. Place your bets on how silly this gets. And welcome to Factual, a bonus show that pops up from time to time when I have both the ability and availability to do one, where I talk about the realities of trans and intersex people like me. If you're new here, my name is Ember, and I'm an intersex woman of transgender experience and diverse education, a pro-human public speaker, and, as it happens, a science enthusiast. This is where you thump that subscribe button like an evangelist with a Bible, then flip through those like and share buttons as if you were hunting for a verse of scripture to cherry pick. Let's get to it. This is an older video, but a compelling one nonetheless, titled The One Question That, what is it, trans activists can't answer? Something like it doesn't matter. We'll get to it. Enjoy.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Council of Trent podcast.
First note, the logo being Trent's own giant head. Amazing, right? Like, okay, but also calling your show the Council of Trent when it's literally just you. It's I am the consensus. It's giving big patriarchy energy.
I'm your host, Catholic Answers apologist and speaker, Trent Horn. Today I want to focus on the single question that I think is most helpful when it comes to resolving the issue of transgender identity. So when I talk about other moral issues, I find it's important to focus.
Casting transgender people existing as a moral issue is a bit of a problem. Not only is it circular, it's begging the question, it's inserting your conclusion into your foundational premises, but it's also kind of horrible because when we talk about people existing as a moral issue, it evokes things like, what will we do about the Jewish question? Or what's the moral answer to the Black population? It's a little bit genocidally flavored, perhaps, maybe.
Is the discussion on a key question or a central question. So take the issue of abortion, for example. It would be easy to get sidetracked and talk about adoption and government programs to provide for the poor and overpopulation. And I try very hard to not get sidetracked by that. Instead, I always bring the discussion back to one question. What are the unborn? If the unborn are human beings.
He talks about, first of all, starting with abortion when he wants to talk about trans people is itself a sidetrack. I get that he's trying to build an analogy, though, so I'll give him some leeway on that one. But he talks about a few other things that aren't the central issue and then brings up another thing that is not the central issue. What does it matter what the unborn are? Because that's not the question. The question of abortion is actually a twofold question. The first is understanding that abortions have always happened. Do we want them to be safe or not? And the other fork of the question is, do people have the right to the control of their own bodies? Because anything beyond that, the nature of the unborn and all of that, that's an argument from consequence. That's saying, well, if we allow people to control their own bodies, then other potential people, we're not even addressing the question of whether the unborn count as people or not, because it's not relevant. That's a consequence. It's downstream. First, we have to establish if people have the right to their own bodies. And if they do, whatever's downstream does not matter. It doesn't matter if a person is unborn or the world's greatest violinist or the world's richest man. No one has the right to someone else's body. Period.
Then abortion can't be justified. If the unborn are not human beings, then abortion needs no justification. Who cares? I think that's also important when it comes to the issue of transgender identity, that it's easy to be distracted, to talk about all of the ancillary issues surrounding it, educating children, bathrooms, locker rooms. Those issues are important. And we do need
Educating children is important, yes, because there are trans people who may not have the language to express what's going on with them. And without clear language, it can cause a whole lot of suffering over the course of their lives. The other things, though, not so much. We used to talk about bathrooms and sports teams when it came to Black people, too. Do Black people have the right to use white people's bathrooms? Do Black people have the right to play on white people's sports teams? See how silly that sounds? It's the same conversation.
To be able to talk about them. But it's easy to either get heated in these discussions or to worry about offending people or being offensive to people and not speaking up at all. So we need to be compassionate.
Being compassionate means being worried about offending people. Because do you have a point you want to make, or do you want to piss people off? If your goal is to piss people off, then by all means, not only don't worry about offending people, but go for it, because that's what you're trying to do. But if you want to actually connect and communicate, avoiding offending people might be a good place to start.
Yet assertive. So we shouldn't be just dismissive. I think it's important to make a distinction between the advocates, the people who advocate for transgender ideology on media, in universities.
Point of order, transgender ideology is a conservative right-wing dog whistle. It is not a thing. Transgender people exist the same way Black people exist, the same way white people exist. It's not an ideology. There is a gender-based ideology. It's this fiction that transgender people are themselves fictional. We can demonstrate we exist. Can Trent demonstrate his magical invisible carpenter ghost who wants to live inside him? Perhaps. Or even a talking donkey. That would be a good start.
That some of them can be over the top in their rhetoric and their language. And separating that from the average person who has gender dysphoria, who feels like they are trapped in the wrong body. And to have
another minor note, as we discuss frequently, trapped in the wrong body is not, strictly speaking, what we generally say. A person may use that terminology to quickly convey the concept of what it feels like to have gender dysphoria, but that's not literally what we're saying is happening with gender dysphoria. And because I'm a fair person, points to Trent for recognizing that gender dysphoria is a real thing.
Compassion upon that person, but compassion does not entail feeding into a false sense of identity. So someone who has...
And there it goes. You can't say gender dysphoria is a real thing and then turn around and say there's a false sense of identity. The false sense of identity is when we try to pretend we're cis, sometimes for decades, to our great detriment. It doesn't work because that's not who we really are.
Anorexia, for example, to be compassionate towards them.
No. I'm going to rewind a couple of seconds because that whole parenthetical is kind of important. So bear with me here.
As anorexia, for example, to be compassionate.
Anorexia is very different from gender dysphoria. I know because I've been diagnosed with both of those things. With anorexia, you see something that isn't there. With gender dysphoria, you see something that is there that shouldn't be. The treatments are very different. One is psychological, one cannot be treated psychologically. We cannot treat them the same way. We have tried it, it does not work.
Passionate towards them is not to agree with their mistaken sense of identity in thinking that they are.
How do you know a person's identity is mistaken? How can you possibly know better than they do what their identity is? How does that work? Explain, please.
Obese and they need to lose weight when they're actually underweight. So someone who has gender dysphoria, helping them does not mean, oh, you're a man who says you're a woman. Yeah, you're definitely a woman. Let's help you do surgery to more correspond to that idea. That actually would not be a loving thing. So how do we focus?
No, deliberately misunderstanding what gender dysphoria means, referring to a woman as a man who thinks she's a woman, would not be a loving thing. Deliberately misunderstanding a person's situation to exert power over their lives, definitely not a loving thing. Technically correct. But maybe the compassionate thing is to try to understand where a person's coming from when you don't understand what it's like to be in their shoes. Instead of just declaring, I'm not like you, therefore you're wrong for being a different kind of person. Holy shit.
Focus a conversation. I think the best way to focus a conversation is focus on one question. So when it comes to the issue of transgender identity, this is the question that I would focus on. What is a woman?
We knew that was coming, right? We knew, because there's always one question. This is the one question. It's never what is a man, but also the fuck does it? Yes, I realize what is a man is his next thing down, even though he said there's one question. It's his second question out of the one questions. It's number 2 out of one questions. Very good. Trent is a Catholic, not necessarily great at math. Never mind. It's always what is a woman? What the hell does that have to do with trans people? Ask a cis woman what is a woman. What do you mean? What is the relevance?
Or what is a man? So there's different ways of framing this one question. You could say, what is a woman? Or what is a man? Another way to frame it is, what is the difference between men and women? And
that's another begging the question, as well as a false dichotomy, because it's not a matter of men or women as if there's only the two exclusive options. We know that's not true. For one thing, there's gender fluid people. For another thing, there's agender people who don't have any sense of gender whatsoever. And if you want to deal with the strictly anatomical, there's intersex people, just to name a few. So that's blown completely out of the water. If you really want to get right down to it and say, well, what criteria, what categories might a person be assigned or observed, if you prefer, to consider them to be woman's side of the spectrum or man side of the spectrum? And if you think about it for more than, half a second, you would very quickly realize that there are a number of criteria. You don't just observe a person's height or chest size or hip size or length of their hair or how they're dressed. You certainly don't check their chromosomes or what kind of gametes they produce, if any. You might, if you're a physician, check their hormone levels, but dealing with a person in everyday public, probably not so much. So there's a number of criteria we look at, we observe in order to make assumptions. But as we know, assumptions are not necessarily the best way to determine things, which is why it's generally considered polite to ask. Holy crap. So there's a number of criteria we look at. What determines what we think of as a man or a woman? What determines what we think of as a boy or a girl? And if you are thinking, if you're the kind of person who's assuming, jumping right to the conclusion of penis or vagina, first of all, you have no idea what the hell anything means, because those are not mutually exclusive. They're not the same organ. Never mind that, though. First of all, gross. Second of all, do you actually check people's genitals before you decide whether to call them sir or ma'am? If you say you do, you probably are on a list. Just saying. That isn't one of the criteria. That isn't a thing that you interact with in your day-to-day life. So it doesn't actually matter, does it?
is a question that transgender advocates just cannot answer.
Here I have just answered it at great length. I realize this is a pre-recorded video and Trent can't hear what I'm saying right now, so he has no idea that I've answered it. But there is this. When Trent recorded this video, people had been answering it for decades, for many decades. Trent is well aware that there is an answer to this. There are many answers to this. There are many ways to interpret this and interact with this and deal with these sorts of situations. But as an apologist, he's contractually obligated to prevaricate and pretend that his preferred answer is the only answer. In other words, he's fucking lying.
Online, one person who has put this to good effect is Matt Walsh. So Walsh on his Twitter page.
Matt Walsh. Oh, he did make a documentary about What is a Woman, where he went and met with a whole bunch of experts and got answers from a whole bunch of people about what is a woman. He didn't understand any of those answers. He demonstrated that he's, kind of the village idiot, you might say. The fact he didn't understand the answers doesn't mean there aren't answers. But that's sort of the trend with the Daily Wire, isn't it? Every film they produce is dunking on themselves, including the literal movie about basketball that involved dunking, where they proved that you can't actually just declare you're a woman and go play in women's sports, like Ben Shapiro wanted to have happen. Oops. Everything that Daily Wire produces proves them wrong. This is no different. But also, if you want to search through the shorts on this channel, you'll find a video by Matt Walsh from quite some time ago about his "What is a woman" question, where basically I just show him a page of the dictionary. He could just check the damn dictionary. It's really that simple if you really want to get down to it.
When he engages transgender advocates, he'll ask them these questions and he can never get a straight answer out of them. Because when you try to
he can never get it. First of all, how are you going to get a straight answer out of queer people? But jokes aside, he does all the time. He made a whole movie about it, getting answers to this question that he just didn't understand. Oh, you can say, oh, it's evasive and riddled with qualifiers and nuance and intellect and understanding and all these things that are, big words. I just want common sense, 3 words or less. Oh, I can do 3 words or less. What is a woman? A category. It's not a thing. Women aren't things. We're people. And like all people, we're vastly different in our interests, in our appearance, in the way we go about our lives. Can you think of any single thing that all women have in common? Let me know in the comments how that goes.
For an answer, it reveals that the entire transgender identity, this sense of it being a real identity that's objective, that other people must assent to, is all.
In what way is this coming from a Catholic apologist is wild. He believes in a God that is 3 people, but also 1 person. With nothing he can demonstrate objectively. He identifies as a member of a religion based on blood, but there's nothing he can show people objectively to affirm that identity. What are we doing here?
Ultimately incoherent. And we know it's incoherent because transgender advocates are adamant that men and women are not the same. If you call a transgender man a woman or a transgender woman a man, or if you use the wrong pronoun, you're accused of being transphobic. On social media sites, you can be deplatformed. If you tell a trans...
You cannot. No one has ever been deplatformed for using the wrong pronouns for a person, despite Jordan Peterson's claim to fame to the contrary. It has literally never happened. People may lose followers, but the fact that J.K. Rowling, for example, is still one of the biggest accounts on Twitter, you don't get deplatformed. Sorry, Trent. That's just not true. And the 10 Commandments say something about deliberately saying something that's not true. Maybe it'll come to me later.
Gender individual. And I'll show multiple evidence of that here in today's episode. If you say to a transgender individual, no, you are not a woman, you are a man, or use the incorrect pronoun, you can be met with a very emotional response. Here's an example of a trans...
Well, I mean, yeah. If you insult a person, try to degrade them, try to tell them who they are. Like, Trent, if I told you you're not a real Christian, you might take some offense to that. If I told you you're not a real man, I tried to deprive you of your identity as a person, as a human being. You might take some offense to that. Perhaps. Maybe.
Transgender woman or a biological man being referred to as sir instead of ma'am at a GameStop. So here's an example of that.
Excuse me, it's
in partial credit, this is probably an older video, and so the fact that this tired old clip, which much like Bible verses, is heavily cherry-picked. This is a much longer video, and we're going to get a fragment of it. But the fact it's so vastly overplayed, at the time Trent released his video, this may have been maybe not new, but less old.
ma'am. It is ma'am.
I can call the police if you'd like me to. You need to settle down.
You need to settle down. Mind your business, okay? Ma'am. Once again, ma'am.
I said both of you.
No, you said sir. Once again, it's ma'am.
I actually said both of you guys. It was general.
Right beforehand, you said sir.
Sir? Okay.
Mother, take it outside. If you want to call me sir again, I will show you sir.
Now, whenever I see examples,
Now, that clip, of course, is meant to demonstrate here's a trans woman who is a little clocky, doesn't really pass. We're supposed to judge, we're supposed to laugh, but also the fact that after being repeatedly provoked, she gets a little feisty. Oh, well, that's very man-like behavior. Have you ever met a woman? Because I know a lot of women who would do exactly the same thing. Women are different. I know it's a shock. Not every woman is a trad wife. Some women do not put up with shit. Insult them once or twice, you may escape with an I'm sorry. But if you keep doubling down and doubling down and doubling down, you are going to get your ass handed to you. Cis or not.
of things like this, I feel a sense of sadness because someone who is suffering from gender dysphoria, they have a lot of hurt and pain, and it's understandable, though not acceptable, that they would lash out at people in public.
Blame the victim. Abuser language. I love it. When you take a person and you harass them and harass them and harass them, and they finally stand up for themselves, they're the one lashing out. Sure. Very Christian, Trent. Super job. I'm sure Jesus is very proud of you.
So I don't want to dwell on bad behavior or anything like that. But the point I want to make is that transgender advocates, they are firmly set. Men and women are not the same, but they don't define what a man is and a woman is. So how do they know they're not the...
Again, we just did that. There's a whole bunch of characteristics, right? There's physical perceptions. There's visual cues. Sometimes it's makeup. Sometimes it's hair length. Sometimes it's style of dress. But none of those things are absolute, right? Like, I happen to be wearing a dress, but I'm sure every single person watching has seen women wearing pants. There is no single conclusive thing. It's a constellation of criteria. And that's only if you want to make an assumption about someone. If you come across a tomboy or a lesbian, perhaps, just to name a couple examples, you may get yourself into a lot of trouble if you start calling her sir. No transgender people needed.
The same thing. It would be like getting mad. It says it'd be like if somebody told you that you're not from New York, you're from the Big Apple, and you got mad. You're like, I am from New York. I'm not from the Big Apple. Well, New York and Big Apple refer to the same city in New
York. What are you saying, Trent? We know New York and Big Apple mean, well, I mean, technically New York City is all 5 boroughs and the Big Apple is specifically Manhattan. So there is a distinction, but it's not that important. You're saying referring to someone as the opposite of who they are is the same as referring to a place that has 2 names by the other name. So it sounds to me, Trent, like you're the one saying there's no distinction between men and women. Fascinating.
New York State with the Empire State Building in it. They're basically the same thing. It's like the morning star and the evening star. Those terms both refer to the planet Venus. But we know man and...
They can both refer to the planet Venus. They can also refer to Lucifer or to Jesus or to Mercury, depending on who you're talking to and at what time and so on and so forth.
Women do not refer to the same thing. They refer to different things. So how do we know they refer to different things? Well, their meanings are different. Well, what are their meanings? That gets us back to the main question. What is a man? What is a woman?
Why don't you save us a lot of time, Trent, and tell us what you think those words mean? Define your terms. It makes things a lot more clear.
In defining it, because the problem is when you define what a woman is, you are going to indirectly define what is not a woman. And under transgender ideology, anybody who says they're a woman is a woman. Anyone who says they're a man is a man. You can't exclude anyone who makes those claims. So that's why the other...
Yes and no. There are deeper ways you could look into things, and things often have a great deal more nuance. But it's a lot easier for everyone, especially when you're dealing with something that can only be understood through self-identification, to just fucking ask people and take it at face value. When Trent says he's a Christian, I just take him at face value. I don't make him prove it to me through some objective, observable thing. That would be silly. If a person tells me they have a migraine, I just take it at face value instead of trying to make them prove it to me. That would be insane.
Side is very hesitant to want to define these terms, but if they can't define them, it seems like they don't really exist. I'll give you a few examples of...
Yes, if we can't define it precisely, then it doesn't really exist. Tell me about a chair, Trent. How would you define a chair? Because if you start with that 4 legs business, not only are you going to get the meme about the horse that stumped Graham Linehan, but you're going to get the fact that this chair I'm in right now has 1 leg. So tell me about precise definitions. I guess no chairs exist, and probably no cows either. Whatever.
Where transgender advocates just have a prickly pear of a time. Is that an expression? It should be. Defining it. Here's Joe Swin.
You know you can edit your pre-recorded shows, Trent. You don't have to include every random thing that pops into your brain. Now, this is a live show, so I have to be a bit more careful about my words, which is why I sometimes pause to make sure I've got my thoughts in order, because these can be edited, but then it's no longer an unedited live. But I digress. The point is, if you say random shit that doesn't serve your point and just distracts your audience, maybe edit that out. Just a helpful hint.
She was the former leader of the Liberal Democratic Party in the UK. So she's on a radio show, asked this question, and here's her response.
It's really great that your party promotes women's rights. So please, can you tell me what a woman is?
Well, I know I'm a woman, and I think we know what we are, and I think all women are important, and their rights need to be protected. Whether they are cis or trans, whether they have a disability, we are all important in all of those different ways.
And PragerU.
Okay, so one random politician couldn't clearly answer her understanding of what a woman is when the question was sprung on her by surprise. I don't know if you've ever been given a gotcha question. Like, you think you're engaging with someone in good faith, and then they all of a sudden slap you upside the face with blatant bad faith. It can be a little startling. It can put you on your back leg. Yeah, some people are going to fumble, but the fact one politician didn't handle the question with grace means no one can possibly answer it. You know, the best kinds of data are anecdotes, especially anecdotes that require you to go all the way to the UK to find one politician on a random radio show. Amazing. Good journalism, I suppose. That's the sure sign that you're telling the truth, Trent, like a good Christian.
Who actually went out and interviewed a bunch of college students, asking them, what is a woman? And they got similarly vague, evasive, or poetic answers that don't really make sense.
If you ask a bunch of Americans, could 2 + 2 make 5? If you find half a dozen, maybe you ask 1,000 people, but if you find half a dozen who say, well, yeah, under the right circumstances, maybe 2 + 2 makes 5. And then you took those half a dozen clips and put them together and said, look, Americans think 2 + 2 makes 5. They don't even understand math. They can't define it. Therefore, math isn't a real thing. It's just a liberal delusion. What the fuck? What are you trying to demonstrate here? You'll notice these kinds of word games, this kind of little kid bullshit, is what apologists of every stripe use when they know they don't have something they can actually present, when they don't have a real case to show you.
You guys define a woman?
There's no like certain definition of a woman.
Strong, independent, free.
Anybody who identifies himself with the term a woman. I feel like gender is pretty fluid. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think you need to define any stuff, like anything like that.
I don't really like to label things, you know, just a woman, you know, women have their parts, but I feel like, you know, they can be whatever they want to be, you know?
Do you think that
the parts that he's sampling kind of tell on himself a little bit, because he's leaning towards this idea that women have parts. The thing that makes a woman is the parts, or more specifically, certain features of the anatomy, which incidentally can be changed. If you're going to rely on the anatomy thing, maybe you should think about that first, because that'll demolish your transphobic arguments. But that's neither here nor there. It's a bioessentialist argument, because that's what the gender critical position is. It's misogynistically bioessentialist. Women aren't people. We're uteruses who happen to be able to walk and talk. That's the central case. That's the main reason they have a problem with trans people, because it makes them realize women can be people, not just uteruses, and they fucking hate it.
I could be a woman?
If you wanted.
So this isn't just a gotcha moment, though. It's a real philosophical problem for people that want to defend this transgender identity. Now, some people might...
Is it a philosophical problem? I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing people who maybe haven't thought about the question very deeply, because it's not that important, TBH, unless you're, you know, a debate bro like Trent, I suppose.
I turn around and say, okay, smart guy, you do better. You define a man and a woman. And what they'll do at this point is they'll try to point out instances where you have intersex or chromosomal anomalies where we're not sure. And then they'll try to cast doubt on the whole idea that men and women are separate, that we can define them.
Well, now he's conflating, and we knew this was coming because this is the bioessentialist argument. There is no gender. There's only sex. Man and woman must mean male and female. They're synonymous terms, respectively, of course. But he's kind of giving away the game there, too. He's saying he doesn't have a definition for these things. He has to treat them as synonyms because he can't understand them on their own terms. Literally, their own terms. For him, he might see himself in the mirror. He may see his hair. He may see that he needs to shave or whatever the case may be. But what he's thinking in his brain is there's a pair of testicles with some extra meat attached. How debasing. How pathetic. What an empty life to be thinking of yourself as nothing more than reproductive material being carried around waiting for a chance to reproduce. As if your life means nothing else. It's no wonder people like Trent like to lose themselves in religion and other philosophical distractions when life seems so very empty.
Objectively. I mean, my definition would be simple. A man, when it comes to human beings, a man is a human being ordered towards the act of impregnation, and a woman is a human being ordered towards the act of gestation. Or
what the fuck does ordered towards mean? So this is hedging. This is weasel words, for lack of a better term. He wants to say a man is the impregnator and a woman is the impregnatee, because patriarchy, that's how that works, apparently. But he's trying to be a little bit more PC about it and saying the person who gestates or the person who impregnates. But he can't say that either, because there's exceptions, right? There's people who haven't yet hit puberty and so can't produce gametes one way or the other. There's people who have passed their ability to, be fertile, shall we say. And then there's people who just don't have that capability at all. So this is oriented towards a person who, if everything worked properly, I guess, would be a man. So there's some problems with his terminology and his definitions already. He's got so many qualifiers in here, and yet he's disqualifying so many people, despite the fact But this is the clear definition. This is the 3 words or less. Okay, Trent. He's got so many people who, well, you know, you're oriented towards being a man. If only your parts functioned, you would be a man, but because they don't, you're not a man. You're not fully a man. You're an unman. You've been unmanned by Trent Horn. Oh goodness.
Or being pregnant. So you're just going to take it all down to pregnancy? Yeah, because we can find biological sex in other animals. One animal in the species impregnates, the other animal is impregnated, or
couple of points. First of all, biological sex isn't actually a term, right? It doesn't mean just one thing. What are we talking about when we say sex? It has to do with biology, yes, but there's a bunch of different ways we could be using that term. Are we talking about gametes? Are we talking about chromosomes? Are we talking about hormones? Are we talking about anatomical features? What do you mean specifically if you want to speak biologically? But also, this false premise that it's either or in biology, that's just not true. We know of many species that are both at the same time, or one then the other, or where there's multiple flavors of male or female. And even though they're both kinds of males, they're distinct and not compatible with each other, like the Cazenovia lake sunfish, for example, or vice versa. There's 2 different sexes that both produce large gametes, and which would then be eggs, but they are different and incompatible with each other. So no, it's not always and only 2. Silly, Trent.
or their eggs are fertilized, whatever it may be. We see this in all other kinds of non-human animals. The same is going to carry over to human beings. That's the basic bio.
Slick and Slylicious points out also many species can self-impregnate. And while there are some who are hermaphroditic to the point that they can self-fertilize, there's also parthenogenic animals who practice a form of cloning, you might say. But then there's also asexual creatures. A lot of them are single cellular, but still, there's a bunch of ways this works.
Biological difference. Now, of course, if a man is unable to have sex, if he's impotent, or if a woman is unable to become pregnant, she's infertile, she doesn't stop being a woman, and the man doesn't stop being a man. The definition is, what are you naturally ordered?
So it's not actually about pregnancy then, is it? Oops. And also, being impotent doesn't mean you can't have offspring. You just need, technological assistance. But it's doable.
Towards. So, for example, I cannot become pregnant. Now, I can't become pregnant.
Actually, Trent, you might be surprised. It's a long topic. We're not going to get into it today. But if you gave me enough money, I guarantee you I could make a baby grow in your belly.
You could take an embryo and put it inside me and it would grow. You could maybe call it a pregnancy, but it's not a natural pregnancy. I can't naturally be.
Oh, it's not a natural pregnancy. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Because if you use in vitro fertilization, well, that's not a natural pregnancy. If you use a surrogate, that's not a natural pregnancy. Does your child not count as a person because it wasn't a natural pregnancy? What is it with this naturalistic fallacy? I mean, this man calls himself a philosopher, but he's dropping fallacies left and right. If you're not familiar, the naturalistic fallacy is the bad argument, the fallacious position that just because something has to be natural to be real or legitimate, or that natural is better. For instance, why use chemotherapy when you could use essential oils? Because those are natural. Probably. I don't know much about essential oils. That's kind of woo-woo stuff. Poison ivy is better than sunscreen because it's natural. It doesn't make any damn sense. It's a bad argument, but here he is using it.
Become pregnant, but I'm not infertile because of that, because I'm a man. I'm not a woman. And so that's why these biological definitions of manhood and womanhood are helpful, but you got to
those were not biological definitions, and also man and woman are not biological terms. That you don't have man lions or woman tigers, that isn't a thing that happens ever, right? But we do, interestingly enough, have examples of transgender critters, what we call transgender. They don't have gender exactly, but what they do have is lionesses, for example, who stop going through their reproductive cycle, grow out their mane, get big and strong, and start acting like the lions. Still genetically female, but indistinguishable from a genetically male lion. Neat trick, huh? And we see this kind of thing in dozens and dozens and dozens of species. Now, we haven't yet observed it in a primate like us, assuming you even believe in evolution, because evolution denial is a related conspiracy theory, but that's neither here nor there. We do, however, observe primates behaving in ways that are within the culture of their group. Typific. That's not the word I'm looking for. Representative, shall we say, of the roles commonly associated with the other sex. So you might say have a male monkey doing things that female monkeys typically do. Is that transgender?
Remember to talk about naturally ordered towards, not just if you can become pregnant, you're a woman, because there's women who cannot become pregnant yet, they're children, or they can't become pregnant. And
I love that he's pointing out the holes in his own argumentation. It's all about pregnancy, but there's also people who cannot become pregnant, which shows there's holes in my argument. But I'm going to say that means those aren't holes in my argument, as if me pointing out the problems in my own position means there aren't problems in my own position. What are we doing?
More, they're past menopause, but what are you naturally ordered to within the act of reproduction itself? I think that's the most workable definition, but some people will bring up other issues to try to muddy the waters, especially different chromosomes we have. So I want to play with you a clip where Ben Shapiro...
Trent, in fairness, you didn't say anything about chromosomes, and that's kind of legitimate, actually, because we know about XX men, XX males even, people who have the SRY gene on an X chromosome and so develop testes, which produce testosterone, and their bodies androgynize. XX men. There you go. With the X men, the double negative means it's a man, right? But there's also XY females, actual biological females, because they have the ability to get pregnant in the natural way and also have all the other features of being female. However you want to categorize that, who naturally get pregnant and naturally reproduce. So yeah, chromosomes aren't even a factor in your walking uterus model, Trent. So yeah, we don't have to worry about chromosomes. But now we're going to dive into chromosomes, aren't we?
Is engaged on a panel with Dr. Drew and others. The person sitting next to him is a transgender woman, is a man. I think his name is Zoe. He was the helicopter pilot who filmed the O.J. Simpson chase.
We opened this discussion with Trent talking about how if you intentionally misgender someone when you know their gender identity, that gets you canceled. And here he is intentionally doing it, intentionally being an asshole. And yet he still has a channel to this day. So his continued existence on this social media platform demonstrates that he himself is full of bullshit and also a bully. Amazing.
And then later identified as transgender. And so they have a heated moment in the discussion, but there's something that Zoe says in the midst of it I want to focus in on. So I'm just going to play the clip, because it's also evidence that, once again, if you say a transgender woman is a man, well, you look what will happen to Ben Shapiro.
Mainstreaming. Right. Ben Shapiro, also famously canceled. We haven't heard from him in years. It's not like he still runs a multi-million-dollar billionaire-backed propaganda organization or anything. No, that could never happen.
Delusion?
It's not delusion.
Why would you call it delusion? Because Bruce, Caitlyn Jenner, I'll call him Caitlyn Jenner.
No, it's her. You're not being polite to the pronoun.
Because
disrespectful.
Okay, forget about the disrespect. Facts don't care about your feelings. It turns out that every chromosome
I love it when Ben says your facts don't care about your feelings and then proceeds to make every fucking argument entirely out of his own feelings. But I know that's not the point of this clip. It's just every time he says that, it's funny to me.
Every cell in Caitlyn Jenner's body is male with the exception of some of his sperm cells. It turns out that his sperm structure is male.
Wait, I need
It turns out that he's still...
Is Ben suggesting that sperm cells aren't male? But also, the vast majority of cells in your body don't actually have a sex function. It's true. Your red blood cells, for example, they don't care if you have an X or a Y or whatever, because they don't actually have a nucleus. But also, your other cells that do have nucleuses, for instance, they don't care what they're coded for. If your system is running with testosterone, they'll respond to the testosterone. If your system is mostly estrogen, they'll respond to the estrogen. Usually, even that isn't universal. There are exceptions to that as well, like complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, for instance. Most of your cells are just cells. They don't have anything to do with reproduction, and so they don't care. And it doesn't actually matter.
Has all of his male appendages. How he feels on the inside is relevant to the question of his biological sex.
I don't agree with that. Excuse me, the chromosomes within our
both know
nuclei. Yeah,
chromosomes don't necessarily mean you're male or female.
Gender.
With gender
identity. Go ahead. No, so
especially, but even so, you have a thing like Klinefelter's syndrome. So you don't know what you're talking about. You're not educated on genetics.
Would you like to discuss the genetics?
No,
what are your genetics?
So I'd stay away from the genetics and back to the brain scans.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion.
Mildly inappropriate. Ben feels entitled. And, this has been discussed on other videos because that is an old clip. But Ben, broadly speaking, feels entitled to shit on everyone else. But as soon as he gets any pushback, I'm being threatened. Someone protect me. Cry babies. Cry bullies, in fact. That's sort of the whole thing.
If I told somebody who said that the Eucharist was a cracker or made a blasphemous joke that they're going to go home in an ambulance, I think you go to the hospital in an ambulance, but you get the point.
That's interesting. Because while insulting the Eucharist, calling it a cracker, isn't actually an attack on Trent, it's an attack on some of the ridiculous things he believes in. So it's not the same thing. He understands that there is a distinction, but when it's applied to trans people, it doesn't work the same way. Interesting. Very interesting. I just level-headed philosopher who just outright shows you the double standard. He's like, hey, here, I have a double standard. I'm big brain, good thinker. Yes. Subscribe. But also subscribe. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button. We are trying to grow this channel and not just grow the channel. I have a specific goal in mind. I want to get to 10,000 subscribers. And I realize we've got a long way to go, which is why we need the help of every subscriber we can get. The reason is I want to do proper fundraisers on this channel. I want to raise money for organizations that are making the world a better place. Organizations like RAIN, organizations like the Trevor Project, for example. But YouTube hides that fundraiser button behind the 10,000 subscriber marker. So we need to get to that marker. We do have fundraisers going for both of those organizations available through the merch store. There's a, you know what? I will show you. I will show you the things. These are not sized for this type of screen, so they're going to look a little weird, but I will show you. First, we have the shirt. This is for the Trevor Project. All proceeds from this shirt go to support the Trevor Project. And for the RAIN, we actually have a short video, which also isn't sized for this format, but I will show you. So please stand by for 1 minute. Hey, want to do something good? Recently, a person who had sent me this version of my logo, unsolicited, made public statements promoting violence against minority women and survivors of abuse. Now that person's gift will do some good instead. 100% of the proceeds from sales of this survivor's mug will go to fund the nonprofit organization RAIN in their efforts to provide vital resources to survivors and to build a future where fewer of us need this kind of help. Find this item at my store at betterthanember.com. And if you want to learn more about how you can be better at supporting survivors, check out this video, where I've distilled the best practices for helping survivors that I collected from speaking with actual crisis professionals at RAIN, Willow Grove, Vera House, and independent counselors. Whenever you can turn the harmful acts of others into something good, that is an epic win. So yay, there's that. There's two ways you can help support those two organizations. It's not the same as a direct fundraiser. A big portion of the cost goes to the production of the item. On the plus side, you get an item, but it's a lot harder to fundraise that way. I want to fundraise directly. And if you want to help me do that, subscribe, but also share this video. I'm quite sure this will make anyone with a red hat extremely mad, and that could be kind of fun. So, share it around. Make some messes, cause some chaos, make Thanksgiving awkward. But I appreciate your help, however you can help. All right. All that said, continuing on.
If I threaten somebody with harm because they misidentified the Eucharist or Christ or something I held dear, I would be considered a religious fanatic, even though that is a core element of my belief system. It's something I've...
Wait, is he justifying becoming violent over a joke about the Eucharist? Which, to be clear, is literally a cracker that people play pretend over. Now, I try to be respectful of people's beliefs whenever possible, but here Trent is saying that he would be justified in becoming violent about such a thing. And yet, he's holding a trans person to a different standard when it's not just a thing he believes in that's being insulted, but part of the person's own identity, their very humanity, that's being insulted and attempted to be taken from them by force. Remember, verbal assaults are still assaults. They're still acts of violence. So what are you saying, Trent?
Value very highly and can become emotional about. Yet the decorum of civil society maintains that we don't threaten people with violence just because they disagree with very important beliefs that we hold. And more...
Right, but a belief you hold is not the same as who you are. If a person came up and said, well, Trent, you appear to be of Italian descent, and, Italians have been uncitizened, unpersoned even, so you got to put on these chains and come to the work camp, you might be a little mad. And rightly so, I dare say. Because here's the thing that right-wing people really don't like. All humans deserve human rights. The reason is simple. While I myself am not all humans, I am part of humans. And if any part of humans is denied human rights, are considered not fully human, then it could be me in that part. So it serves my self-interest to ensure every human has human rights. Also, it's a lot easier to keep track of who deserves rights when everyone deserves rights.
More people are thinking that, well, when it comes to these particular issues, that rule doesn't hold true anymore. But what this gentleman did bring up, though, he did say, well, look, it's complicated. There's Klinefelter syndrome, whereas Ben is saying, look, genetics, it's very clear. And you might fall into this trap. But
genetics is not very clear, as we've previously mentioned, but also Klinefelter syndrome is an intersex condition. It's just one of many, but it is. But that's not the same as gender.
I don't want you to. Some people might say to you, well, what's a man? What's a woman? Well, a man is a human being with an XY sex chromosome pair, and a woman is anyone who has an XX chromosome pair.
Typically, if you just stick typically on that, you'll be fine. But if you want to make an absolute statement, you're just wrong, Trent. You're just showing you don't know what the hell you're talking about, because there are exceptions. Quite a lot of them. You're just saying things you know are wrong. You know what that makes you, Trent? That makes you a liar. You know what Ray Comfort says about liars, right?
Not a good path to go down. I say ordered towards impregnation, gestation. The reason I do that, and I don't just do chromosomes, is because there are people who have chromosomal abnormalities within their sex chromosomes. So I want to go through them here briefly.
I love how he says abnormalities, as if it's a disorder. Now, sometimes it can be. There are chromosomal abnormalities that can make it difficult for a person to have a normal life in the world that we have now. People like that need accommodation in the same way anyone else with a congenital disability deserves accommodation, because all humans deserve human rights. Okay, there we are. I don't know if you lost me there or what the deal is, but I think we're back. I can't remember where the hell I was. Technical difficulties, live broadcasting. Let me know if you can see me again. Hopefully we're good. Mark says, Ember, you were frozen by God. Thank you for dropping by, Mark. Oh, goodness. Hopefully we're in good shape now. Let's just continue. We'll call that a smite. Whatever the hell I was about to say, we'll call it a smite, and we'll just go on.
So you're not caught off guard by them. So you can talk about them and say that even people that have these variants in their sex chromosomes, in their DNA, that doesn't disprove the fact that 99.999% of the time, we can identify someone's a man and someone's a woman.
No. You often, typically, can identify if someone's a man or a woman based on their presentation, because you're not checking their genetics, but also to imply that genetic abnormalities are so rare that it's, 0.0001%. No. If you add up all the intersex conditions, you're looking at something like 2%. And that's that we know of. And that's the people who have been identified, who have had themselves checked. And a lot of people don't. Because if a thing never presents as a problem, it never gets found out. So it's definitely a higher percentage than that. But on top of that, there's a whole bunch of other intersex conditions that we haven't really included in that tally yet. For instance, geneticists estimate that chimeras may make up as much as 10% of the population. A chimera is when two fraternal twins fuse together in the womb to become a single person, like me. I am a chimera. I'm fused twins. In my case, the two twins, for lack of a better term, had opposite sex chromosomes. So I have some cells that are XX and some cells that are XY. That makes it an intersex condition in my case. That's not always what happens with chimeras. But statistically, about half of chimeras are going to have mixed sex characteristics, which means half of that 10%, or 5% of the population, will be intersex chimeras. That's another 5% of the population. When you add it all together, you may be getting close to 10% of the total population have intersex conditions. That's not 0.0001% trend. But again, math, not his thing.
Even if they had different chromosomes. So I'll give you some examples. So just to recap, 46XX, that's female. 46XY is male. You get an X from your mom, and you get an X or a Y from your dad. So your dad, those genes are what kind of decide if you're...
Typically, like I mentioned earlier, there are XY women who produce normal offspring, but we have observed XY females born from XY females. So yeah, it's not always you get an X or a Y from your dad.
Going to be a man or a woman. XX 46 traditionally female, XY 46 traditionally male. Sometimes, though, the sperm might be empty, might not have a chromosome. So you only get one X from your mother. You would be 45X. That's Turner syndrome. About 1 in 2,500 people have it. These are biological females. They're women, but they have short and webbed neck, low hairline at the back of the neck. They're short in stature. They have stunted development. They deal with infertility issues, lack of secondary sex characteristics, but it's still a biological female. You might get...
Again, biologic. Show me a female who isn't biological. Are there robot females? Are there synthetic females? Like there are organic women who have inorganic parts, but most of those are cis women too.
Sometimes an extra X. So you might have 47 triple X. It's not adult entertainment or anything like that. It's trisomy X, 1 in 1,000 people. They don't just have, they're biological females, but they have 3 X's instead of 2, and they rarely show any symptoms.
Both of these are sex chromosome conditions, but they're not intersex, right? But whatever. Maybe Trent is making a point. I'm sus though, because even if you just take this one case, this 1 in 1,000 case, which is still kind of a lot, really, but even if you just take that already accounts for the entirety of his 0.001%. That's it right there.
You could have 47 triple X, and if you're a woman and not know it actually. The next one is what Zoe brings up, and that is 47XXY. That would be if you got an X and a Y from your father. You would have Klinefelter syndrome. These are...
That's not always strictly true. You can get 2 X's from your mother, or if you have an XY mother, you could get an X and a Y from your mother, and then an X from your father. But details.
They're biological males. They're biological males, affects 1 in 500 people. And it's kind of the mirror version of Turner syndrome, but for men. So you deal with small in stature, fertility issues, might have poor motor coordination, weaker muscles. So that would be XXY, Klinefelter. It's just stunted masculine growth in biological.
Stunted masculine growth. It's intersex, right? Because you have some functions, hormone production, for example, that are based on the fact there's 2 X's. There's others that are based on the fact there's 1 Y, which could be working in tandem with 1 or both X's. So you're going to develop some masculine characteristics and some feminine characteristics. You're literally an intersex person. You may lean a little bit more towards masculine, but you may also lean a little bit more towards feminine, depending on the collection of dominant and recessive traits that you get in those chromosomes. In other words, you're an individual. We're all different. You may have noticed.
Males. Okay, but still, these are men. If you have Klinefelter, you're a man. If you have Turner, you're a woman. You have 47XY.
Well, you don't know that, Trent. You're assuming that, just the same way you're assuming that a person has typical XY, they're a man, when we know that's not true. There are typical XY men who aren't men, so they're not men. I'm not sure how to be more clear with this. Like if you meet a trans woman, like you've shown in any of these clips, and you check their genome, let's assume they have typical XY chromosomes. Yet they're still women. So you know you are wrong, Trent. And the same thing goes the other way, because we always hyper-focus on the women, don't we? But trans men exist as well. And if you did a genotype, a karyotype test on a trans man and found XX chromosomes, then you would not have a woman. The person is still a man who happens to have XX chromosomes.
Y. That would be, sometimes I've heard it called super male syndrome. You have an extra Y, 2 Ys, about 1 in 1,000. These are biological males. Not too many variants. You might be taller, have acne, learning disabilities, might affect your fertility, but biological males, 47XYY, super chromosome, super Y, super male. I mean, I think that's super male.
Super male, but fertility issues. So what is it that you defined male as earlier? Reproductive capability, but there's fertility issues. Interesting. These definitions seem to be contradicting each other, Trent.
Tetrasomy X, 48 quadruple X. So this would be in the
tetrasomy, but Trent can't handle basic math. He certainly can't handle genetics.
meiosis, the dividing of the sex cells, you get 4 X's instead of 2. These are biological females, but there's varying severity of the intellectual disabilities this causes. About 1 in 50,000 people have tetrasomy X. Biological females with heart defects, skeletal anomalies, intellectual disabilities. 48 triple XY, about 1 in 50,000 people have this. These are biological males, and they tend to have issues with their height and their teeth.
So it sounds like Trent's criteria is if there's any number of Y's present, male. When that's not actually how that works either.
48 double X double Y, biological males 1 in 30,000. So when you have the Y chromosome, specifically the SRY gene on the chromosome, that is what controls for masculine development. So even in these anomalies, the presence of
typically, it's not the only gene involved. Sometimes you get a defective SRY that just never catalyzes. And sometimes you've got more genes downstream that the SRY's activities activate. And if those aren't working, there's a whole chain of things. Trent doesn't understand any of them. He wants everything to be very simple, black and white, on or off. And that's just not how anything in nature works.
a Y almost in every case tells us that this is a biological male. So 48 double X double Y, developmental delays, you might have sometimes might be connected to autism. 49 quadruple X.
I don't want to say that he's absolutely wrong about that, because I have seen no studies or anything linking a 48 chromosome anomaly to autism. To my knowledge, we don't actually have a cause for autism pinned down. Maybe Trent knows something I don't, but considering how he's performed so far, I'm skeptical.
Y, also called Fracaro syndrome. Now we're getting to the really rare ones here. 1 in 100,000.
Why? Why are we getting into the really rare genetic disorders? Because we're talking about genes here, not gender. What are we doing? What are you trying to show, Trent? That intersex people are rare? We're not that rare. But even if I grant you that, so what? What are we trying to prove here? The fact that exceptions are rare and so shouldn't count? You know that doesn't make sense. You know that doesn't make sense. One of my favorite illustrations is the periodic table. If you take the prevalence of atoms in the universe, then the universe is binary. It's hydrogen and helium, and a few trace anomalies that shouldn't count. And yet, those are all the things that are necessary for life to exist. So clearly they fucking matter, don't they?
When people have it, the symptoms are just similar to Klinefelter, stunted development in biological males. Still, we're dealing with, we can sort biological male or female, okay? 40.
Cool. You want to sort biological males and females. Again, the fuck does that mean? But sure, let's do it. What am I, Trent? About half my cells are XX, half my cells are XY. If we're going to go by genetics, what the fuck am I, Trent?
9 septuple, what would be for 5? Pentosomy, pentuple X. There's 5 X's. If you have 5 X chromosomes.
Ooh, Trent figured out how to count to 5. We're in trouble now, folks.
Which is a lot. That's pentosomy X. About 1 in 150,000 people have it. These are biological females, all X chromosomes. These symptoms are similar to what you might find in someone with Down syndrome or trisomy 21. You have an extra 21 chromosome. All right, so let's recap. Transgender advocates cannot answer the question, what is a man? What is a woman?
That's 2 questions, and also did that earlier. What else?
Because it's totally subjective. But we know men and women are not the same thing. The biological definition is superior. But
biological definition of a term that isn't biological. What is your biological name, Trent? What is biological money? Have you played a biological computer game? Like, you can't just add biological to something that isn't biological and think that makes sense. What are you doing?
You got to be careful here because biology can be a bit quirky. I like men are ordered towards impregnation. Women are the ones who are ordered towards gestation.
Oh, he likes it. That makes it, you know, an objective, true definition. The fact he likes it. That it's not like an argument from consequence or anything. No. Trent likes it. That's what makes it real, folks.
Even if they can't become pregnant yet, or they can never become pregnant or can't get pregnant again, what are you ordered towards biologically? Most of the time, our chromosomes do tell us this. XX for women, XY for men. But just because there are chromosomal variations, we can still tell in, like I said, 99.999% of these cases, whether
Trent's own figures disproved that. And also he listed the rarest things he could find. There are things that are a whole lot more common. We're talking 1 in 200 range or 1% range, or people like me who may make up as much as 5% of the population. We don't know because we've never done a study on it. But that's another story for another time.
we have a biological male or a biological female. There are the cases, though, that these are focusing on is intersex, where you have ambiguous genitalia, where you have chromosomal anomalies. But here, the vast majority of people who identify as transgender are not intersex. They are XY or they are XX.
Which is why it's weird you bring that up. But also, I do contend that transgender people may all be intersex, or at least many. But even if you don't consider a person with a neurological developmental pattern typical of a sex other than what's indicated by their gonadal atomical structure, even if you don't want to consider that, then being a trans person definitely represents a state of induced intersex. It may not be natural, but if a person needs glasses to see, they can still see. Are they not able to read if it's not natural? You know, does it matter at that point?
But even still, in these difficult cases, we can still do the investigation and find out if the person is a biological male or a biological female. Even so, when people bring up Kleinfeld,
why would it matter? Look, Trent, if a person's running around with this, does it matter what their genes say? If you come up to a person and you like check their genome and you're like, aha, you have an X and a Y, does it change the fact they have boobs? You're trying to equate cause and effect with things that aren't related, right? Like, you talk about how people have trouble defining what a man and woman is. If you walk up to a person who looks like me and say, you're a man, it's you who can't tell who's a man and a woman. Because you're just wrong, Trent.
or Turner just say, well, those are women with a developmental disorder or men with a sex chromosome variation. The only examples that might be different are LaChapelle syndrome. This is XX that has the SRY gene from the Y chromosome, so they develop masculine characteristics as well. I read in the literature a case of someone who was XX, but they had chromosomal mosaicism. So they had elements of the Y chromosome within the X chromosomes. And so they were
No, that's not how that works. Mosaicism is when you have mixed cells, right? So like you could have something like me where you're fused twins or something like that and end up with a chimera, or you can have mixed cells from either something like chimerism where neither fetus develops, or where you exchange cells with another twin who stays a separate individual, and then you're both mosaics, you might say. Or sometimes the fetus exchanges cells with the mother, and then the mother has mosaic inclusions, and the fetus has some of the maternal cells. You can end up with an intersex mosaic baby that way. For example, there's a bunch of different ways it can happen. But it's just a mixture of cells. You don't have to get to the chromosome level. Again, functionally, the majority of the cells in your body may as well not even have X's and Y's in them because it doesn't play any real role in most cells, at least not after development. They're just there.
They were XY, but they were able to become pregnant. So they're XY, but they were able to carry a pregnancy to term. There's only this one case I've been able to find. And when we find cases like this, I would say the outliers do not disprove the general rule. Okay.
The exceptions don't count because they show that my argument is broken.
Here, we've got weird issues of chromosomes and genes intermapping with one another. It would be like that there are cases with brain death. There was an individual.
A better thing, Trent, you may want to consider is it's like the first thing you learn in statistics class. If you ever take a class about statistics, statistics do not apply to individuals. A person may be on an outlier of a statistical bell curve, but that doesn't matter because the individual is still who they are, regardless of how probable the outcome of them being in that position as an outlier could be.
Named TK, who was completely brain dead, but was able to still live, process nutrients, and continue to grow and live for decades. He was on a ventilator and a feeding tube, but he didn't decompose. He continued to live even though he was brain dead. But the vast majority of the time, it's pretty clear when you're brain dead, when you're have total brain death, you're dead. So just as the case of
he also has no idea how brain death works. Now, not the point of anything, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but brain death is generally considered when the areas of your brain where cognition happen is non-functional. Nobody home. But the parts of your brain that keep your heart beating and stuff could still be operational. The fact he needed to be on a ventilator indicated that those parts weren't fully operational. But that's not the same thing as brain death.
TK is a strange, unusual brain death case, does not show, we have no idea if people are alive or dead. We have no idea who's alive and who's dead.
Right. Outliers are not the same as the typical situation. Yeah. Trans people are outliers. We're not typical. No matter how you consider us, we're not typical. Fair enough. It's literally true. Every human being alive is an outlier with regards to something about them. So what?
That weird anomaly with brain death cases doesn't disprove the general universal binary between life and death. The weird case.
Again with the binaries. Can you define life, Trent? If a thing doesn't exist, if you can't define it, can you define life without being circular? You know, instead of saying like not dead. Can you define dead other than not alive? Because however you want to define that, you're going to find edge cases.
This is in the medical literature of someone who's XY and becomes pregnant because they have chromosomal mosaicism. That weird single isolated case does not
No. Again, Trent is not a researcher. He's not a geneticist. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. The fact he could only find one case doesn't mean there is only one case. You can find cases on my website, betterthanumber.com. I have a few case studies listed. I have a few population studies listed. There's a whole bunch of interesting information in there in the gender science section. But that's not the point. How many you can find isn't the point. The fact that it happens and the fact that it's been identified in the literature at least once, probably more, because again, Trent is not a very good thinker or researcher. But if we find it once, it's definitely happened, and probably more than once.
Prove the universal binary. There are men, there are women. Those two roles are required for sexual reproduction in a species.
No, because every other species does not have men and women. You don't need men and women to reproduce. You need, in sexually dimorphic species, males and females, but you can have more than one kind of male. You can have more than one kind of female. We just call them that because that's the system we made up, not how biology is obligated to work. But again, there's also species that are hermaphroditic or parthenogenic or asexual. That is not how it always and only ever works.
Men's role is they are the ones ordered towards the impregnation. Women are the ones who are ordered towards the gestation. And XXXY almost maps, in 99.5% of the cases that are involved.
Now it's 99.5%, which is slightly more honest, but also shows that Trent was just talking out of his ass earlier because he's a dishonest prick. But never mind that. It's also incorrect because even if you just take the standard numbers that are our best guess at the moment based on surveys and what information we have available, you're still looking at something like 2% of the population are intersex, which is not 99.5. You're still looking at another 2% of the population who are transgender, which, whether you consider that an intersex condition, induced or otherwise, or not, is still not 99.5. In fact, if you put the two together, bearing in mind there's some overlap, but there's also some people who are not out either through medical testing as intersex or through social expression as transgender. You're looking at something like at least 5% of the population who is not genital or phenotypical, which is a weird, fun thing to say.
So that's how I would respond to the question, what is a man, what is a woman? It's important for you to know this and the anomalies that people try to stick you on that. But ultimately, point back to the other person and say, look, even if you find one case in the medical literature that's a difficulty from my view, one case, your view can't explain anything. It's completely incoherent. To say a man...
The fact you don't understand it doesn't mean it's incoherent, Trent. Holy shit.
Man is anyone who claims they're a man, and a woman is anyone who claims they're a woman, means the terms man and woman are meaningless, even though you were offended if I call you by the wrong term. So the transgender view simply...
Well, that's not even a straw man. Like, some people are offended if you call them the thing that is not correct, and you should know better. You should have, the compassion to ask instead of making a fool of yourself. But if you do make a fool of yourself, it's not the other person's fault that you have egg on your face. That's your fault. You should say you're sorry and do better. But silly me, I suppose. Okay, I understand Trent is a Christian. You should ask Jesus for forgiveness and do better. Whatever.
We cannot make sense at all. The biological view of being male or female does, and that view ultimately comes rooted in the fact that God made us, Genesis chapter 1. He made...
And here we are back at the start. I thought I was being uncharitable to Trent by pointing out the fact that he does believe in an actual literal mythology as if it were reality. He wants us to demonstrate with empirical, observable proof that our gender identities are something real he should accept, and then he turns around and believes in literal fucking magic. Talk about inconsistency, incoherency, and things not making sense.
Them male and female in his image. No matter who you are a son or daughter of God, made in the image and likeness of God. God loves you. There's a reason you're here. The only reason you're here is because God willed it to be.
Preach, 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 preach. We're very near the end of the video, folks.
Be so, and he desires eternal life for you. And that means all of us have to accept God's offer of salvation, repent from sin, and we have different crosses to carry in life. For some people, maybe the cross of gender dysphoria or some other kind of identity disorder. So our role, those of
gender dysphoria is not an identity disorder. It's whatever. I'm not explaining this to Trent again. I will, however, explain to Trent that Lil of all trades is a pretty cool person because she sent us a super chat for $5. Thank you, Lil. And Lil says, ask Jesus for forgiveness. Jesus likes to watch. Oh my.
us who don't carry that cross is to help other people to carry it. And we do that by not being mean or snarky or cruel, but also not by giving into and indulging a...
Hold on. Helen says, oh, Ember, I'm a dum-dum. One of them asked for resources of ways he can fight the fascists without risk of losing his goat job that he loves. I mean, goat jobs are gay. He is a gay autism spectrum specialist. So yeah, son, the resources on my website are for everyone. I put them there so they're easy for me to reference, but they're also for everyone to use, right? Like if you need a certain study, you can probably find it there. because the things that end up on my website are things that I have to reference more than once. They come up frequently enough that I need the reference handy. So if you need something, it's probably there. And if it's not there, let me know. I'll try to find it. If you come across something that could be useful, I'll at least look at it. You never know, but it's there for everybody. And feel free to share that around because it's there for everybody.
False identity that is hurtful to people. So I hope that's helpful for you all, and I hope you all have a very blessed day. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you want to help us produce more
Council of Trent, and it's just Trent. Amazing. Well, folks, that's about it for us today. That's the end of that video. I thought about covering a news story, but it's just there's so much nonsense. It's specifically it's about Kansas passed a law about policing bathrooms. It's the bathroom bullshit over again. And the reason it's remarkable is because they did it without allowing the public to have a say at all. They were just like, nope, we're doing this. Fuck you all. And it's about policing bathrooms, literal potty police. But I don't want to get into that nonsense today. The political stuff is an entirely separate thing. Maybe I'll do a show about it, but maybe not. We'll see. If you are interested, though, in additional trans-related content, I have another episode already scheduled. It's a part 2 with Bumblebee, who will be joining me to finish reviewing a debate between Helen Weberly and Helen Joyce. We started it last week. We're going to try to finish it off this week. It should be fun. I hope you join us. But also, you can support this channel in a whole bunch of ways. You can subscribe. You can share. Both of those things are extremely helpful. If you can, there's a few different ways you can financially support, because this is my actual job. There's a Cash App and Venmo linked below. Also, there's super chats if you're watching live, super thanks if you're watching later. There's a Patreon. There's a whole bunch of things. There's many options. However you can, whether it's financially or through the free options, it all helps. I very much appreciate it. And as always, thank you for being here, because this is why I do lives in the first place. I appreciate it very much. All right. Catch me tomorrow, every weekday at 11 a.m. Eastern for Learn Together Live, where we do a much more chill stream. I get much less worked up usually, but we learn stuff, which is really cool. And as always, remember, you know what? I have an actual outro written for these, and I am just bad at reading it. I covered most of the things, but I'll do the actual outro thing that I wrote. As always, remember, you don't have to oppose other people existing just because you don't understand, because you can learn and do better, or just let people be, because you are better than religion. Good night. Thanks to all our patrons and top-level members for December. Miranda, Karen Butcher, Jessica the Trans Metal Alchemist, Robin Webster, Maya Adkison, Jimmy Tux, Ian Chen, Lilith, Ember Lynn, The Barely Bearable Atheist, Eric Wander, Jason Jacoby, Lil of All Trades, Deviant Outcast, Kelly King, the Detroit Atheist Queen, The Mighty Filbert, Secular Feelinist, and Geo Sam. And you can add your name here next month by signing up at patreon.com/betterthanember, or by joining Emberships here on YouTube at the Cinder level, which includes all the custom emojis, tons of member-exclusive content, member-only live streams, and a bunch of other stuff. I deeply appreciate all the supporters who keep this channel going. Thank you so much. Because of you, we're building a wonderful community that I'm very proud of.
Just like a spark that's breaking out, can't make a stop, can't turn back now.